And instead what we did, we played around with these strange notions that were partly borrowed from America, but much more borrowed from France and from the speculations on the British Constitution by French writers like Montesquieu. And we borrowed these fatal notions, really, really fatal notions, like universal human rights, and we incorporate the European Convention on Human Rights into British law. Now, here again, Vladimir, human rights sound lovely. What could be nicer? I call it the Paddington Bear approach to society. You know, this sweet, cuddly, furry little thing that's got a little luggage nailed around its neck that says Peru, and therefore it's nice to asylum seekers. It's got its little suitcase, so there's a slight touch of maybe the poor Jew being carted off to the concentration camp or the evacuee, and there's marmalade and sweet sugar and vomit-making sentimentality. Human rights sound lovely, but what does let's just investigate. What does it mean if you say there is a European Convention on Human Rights and you give a European court, the power to enforce it over your own parliament and over your own courts? What does that actually say about the origins of law? Remember, in Britain, we've had for, as I said, 700 years, the notion that the supreme force of law is the consent, in however you want to express it, of the nation. If there's something above the nation that can actually tell the nation what to do, what does that say about our notion of consent? It says, well, it's actually worthless. There's a higher authority. Of course, the idea that there's a higher authority is completely meaningless. It's an absurdity and an invention. But again, how can you believe that there is a European, or still more so, because there's also a United Nations, universal declaration on human rights? If you believe that there are universal human rights, you've got to believe there's a universal human being. Finally, you must believe we're all the same. That, by the way, frontiers are probably a very bad idea. That really any distinction between the citizen and the foreigner. I remember, I vividly recall a few years ago appearing on a discussion programme with that very strange man called Paul Marsh. And I talked about somebody as a foreigner. How dare you use a word like foreigner?
Is it not allowed?
Well, because it's diminishing, they're people, you'll think, you'll get them saying, they're people actually like us. Well, actually, when you look at them landing from those boats from the Channel, they're not remotely people like us. And there's been this extraordinary sloppy-mindedness that thinks, well, we're all really the same. Whereas what I believe passionately is there are vast differences between even the English and French, although we're only separated by 20-odd miles. That we are products. You are as a citizen of a country, as an inhabitant of a country, you're a product of literally hundreds of years of development of institutions, of ideas, of language, things that you literally absorb with your mother's milk. And we've thrown all that out of the window, with utterly disastrous consequences. So, in principle, then, the idea of universal human rights and human rights in general seems to be utterly wrong. But also, the practice of it, and this is where we come to your minorities point, the practice of it has turned out to be absolutely deadly because of the role of judges in interpreting it. The man who seems to me to be more than anybody else responsible, not for the quangocracy side of taking power away from Parliament, but from the judicial side of taking power away from Parliament, is a man who enjoys an immense reputation in the legal world, now dead quite many years, a man called Tom Bingham, who was the last senior law lord before very much Bingham-esque creation of the Supreme Court was set up, again by Tony Blair. And Bingham writes a book on the so-called rule of law, in which he announces this very, very high place that human rights law and international law plays in law. And he never quite, in the published stuff in Britain, says what he really thinks. He did in Australia. And he gave a lecture in Australia in which he sets out fully and in unvarnished terms what the actual effect of human rights law is. And it goes like this. Human rights law is, by definition, anti-democratic insofar as it is counter-majoritarian. And it is biased, he says it absolutely explicitly, to minorities, to protect them against the majority. And he then lists the minorities: the mentally sick, the gypsy, the asylum seeker, the criminal,